Hi guys, HT Movies here. Today I will show you American horror movie from 2006 titled Slither. Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The beginning of the movie shows us a meteor rushing towards planet Earth. Meanwhile, two police officers sit in their vehicle trying to kill time. One becomes excessively annoying and the other one simply tries to ignore his blabbering. During the moment, the meteor breaks the Earth's stratosphere and crashes into the forest. The camera then shifts into the woods where the meteor breaks to reveal a pulsating entity inside. The next scene pops up in the city where people go on about their usual routines. The mayor of the city gets caught abusing others by some young girls as he gets stuck in the traffic. In the meantime, we see a school teacher named Starla. Starla teaches her students about Darwin's theory regarding survival of the fittest. After the lecture ends, she walks outside where her husband Grant arrives to lure her away from every other male. As she walks away, the same police officer from last night named Bill watches her intently and one of his colleagues calls her a gold digger, upon which Bill defends how she had a hard childhood, but Grant came as the luxury in her life and provided her with everything, so she had to accept the offer. Later the same night, the camera pans to Grant's house where he waits in the bed for Starla. She slides in and Grant becomes ravenous to have a go at her, but she states that she isn't in the mood. After many futile attempts, Grant gets up angrily and leaves the house to go to the bar. As he drinks, a girl named Brenda walks up to him and they get accustomed to each other. They end up drunk in the forest and Brenda leaves Grant to a tree to show her engraved initials and how she had a crush on him since childhood. She tries to kiss him but he pulls back. After rejecting her, his eyes catch the crack meteor in a trail beside it. Upon following it, they find a slimy organism lying there. Grant pokes it with a stick and the entity shoots a needle into his body. Grant grunts in pain as the slithering needle impregnates his body. Moaning in pain, he drops to the ground and the organism travels to his brain, which makes him totally dazed out. Entranced in the same way, he drives back to his house and hungrily looks for the raw meat in the fridge. The following morning, Starla wakes up alone in the bed. Meanwhile, Grant gets comfortable in his garage by lying in a heap of leaves. After a while, he gets up and enters the house to meet Starla, who apologizes to him for last night, but Grant seems totally changed as he cries and begins to make love to her passionately. The change becomes admirable to Starla and she mentions it to her coworkers in a happy mood. In the meantime, Grant buys dozens of packs of red meat and drives back to the house. Upon Starla's return, she finds a room completely bolted and Grant states that it's a surprise for her birthday. Afterwards, he runs outside where he hears a crunching noise from his stomach. Just then, a pet dog starts barking at him and Grant glares viciously at the pup. Later that night, the couple plans to go for an event and Starla enters the shower. Grant comes up behind her and some movement under his shirt. Suddenly, two grotesque slimy tentacles emerge from his chest and start leading him towards Starla, but just as she looks back, Grant hides them back under his shirt and runs away, stating that he'll be back very soon. Then, scene shows us the bar where the deer cheer event is occurring. Bill and his fellow Wally sit at the bar and talk, when Bill's eyes suddenly catch the presence of Starla. On the other hand, Grant shows up at Brenda's place, who is completely alone except for her baby. With a flirty expression, Brenda invites him in. Back at the deer cheer event, Starla is outside when Bill joins her. She congratulates him on his promotion, which is followed by an awkward silence. Just as Bill is about to say something, Starla decides to head back inside to hear the mayor's speech. Inside, a mayor named Jack appears on stage and starts talking about the deer hunt excitedly. On the other hand, Grant comes face to face with Brenda and stares at her lustfully as she takes off her shirt. As the countdown begins in the background, Grant rips off his shirt to reveal a grossed out pulsating stomach from which the tentacles emerge. Brenda recoils in horror, but Grant overcomes her and forcefully penetrates the tentacles into her stomach. Meanwhile, the party goes on at the bar and Bill dances lightly with Starla. Back at the house, we see Brenda withering violently as Grant reaches a climax. At night, Starla returns home from the party and meets Grant, who shows up with a blistered face. Starla steps back in terror as Grant tries to confess his stable condition. The next morning, Starla immediately calls the doctor to talk about Grant's condition, but the doctor states that he hasn't seen Grant in over a year. Therefore, she returns back, and on her way, observes the notices about missing pets. On the other hand, Grant can be seen collecting the raw meat from the forest and he drags it to a shed where Brenda is shackled with the chains. She states that she's extremely hungry, upon which Grant feeds her with the raw meat that she devours hungrily. Back at the house, Bill and Wally arrived at Starla's door looking for Grant. Bill states that Brenda has gone missing and Grant was the last one to be seen with her, so Starla should reach him when Grant returns. After agreeing to him, Starla rushes back inside, and due to her suspicions, she breaks the locked door to the basement. As she steps down the stairs of the reeking cellar, she comes across the mutilated carcass of the missing dog, Roscoe. She screams in terror and turns on the light to witness dozens of murdered animals and their meat scattered around the cellar. Terrorized by it, Starla runs back upstairs and tries to call Bill, but Grant springs up on her and enters the house to ultimately ravage her. He pins her to the ground and tries to impregnate her, which causes Starla to freak out, but she hits him back with the table and reaches for the phone. Unfortunately, Grant catches her and tries to strangle her with his flexible and extendable arm, but just then, police officers arrived on scene to witness the horrifying scenario. As they get him at gunpoint, Grant immediately leaves Starla. While escaping the house, Bill and Wally chase him but find the backyard completely empty. The following morning, Jack arrives at the police station and barks orders to catch the monster. The officers joke about it, while defining Grant as a squid. Just then, they receive a call that there's been another attack, so they arrived at a farm to witness the disemboweled dog. After examining the site, Bill calls a meeting and analyzes the probabilities for Grant's next appearance. He pinpoints to the location of Strootmeyer's and they all move out. The officers grab their guns and decide to leave when Starla arrives there to meet with Bill. After much forcing and convincing, she manages to hop in with them on the way to capture Grant. In the interim, the camera shifts to the Strootmeyer's house where the family is having lunch. Just then, the police arrived at their house and the man named Otis walks out to greet Jack and the officers. Afterwards, they all get out and take positions around the field until the night falls in. Amidst the darkness, the cow stands at its trough while the officers are spread all around. They talk with each other and the scene shifts to Bill, who recalls the childhood memories with Starla when she used to come up to his window and claimed that she will be a Hollywood star. As they talked happily about the old times, the danger arrives there as all of them witness the horrifying, ghastly form of Grant, who's now turned into an ugly monster. They all watch in terror as he slashes the cow and drags it into the forest. To follow him, Starla is the first one to step ahead and she strolls into the woods while the rest of the officers get on her tail. Upon reaching a clearing, she calls for Grant, who's now the most grotesque-looking monster. He turns around and hears his wife talk gently to him. She tries to calm him down, but their other member turns up with a gun and threatens Grant. Little does he expect, Grant uses one sudden lash at him and his body gets cut into two. Immediately, they all open fire on him, but Grant hurriedly slithers away into the forest. All of them immediately follow him and they come upon a wooden shed which has an ugly sting to it. Cautiously, they open it and enter inside to come across Brenda, who's swollen to the size of the Rome. As everyone watches in confusion, her situation begins to worsen as her whole body starts convulsing. Eventually, it starts to rip apart, and as everyone stares in utmost fright, she bursts to hurl hundreds of small worms towards them who enter everyone's mouths. Luckily, Bill and Starla manage to close their mouths so the worms eventually leave them and slither out of the shed. The scene now shifts to Otis' house, where his daughter Kylie lays in the bathtub. Her mother calls her for a moment, but she ignores her. Just then, a worm slides into her bathroom through the window and climbs in her bathtub. Upon noticing in the water, she screams in terror, but the worm manages to enter her mouth halfway. Just during that moment, she envisions all the scenes from Grant's life as well as an entourage of hell. But Kylie manages to thrust the worm out and kill it with the hot hair curler. In the interim, she hears screams outside and witnesses that his whole family has been infected with the worms. Therefore, she climbs out on the roof and jumps down to save herself from the worms. Eventually, she climbs in the car, but the worms engulf that as well and the scene fades out. Back at the shed, Starla and others observe the infected, who seem to be alive but unconscious. Bill decides to get some help from the paramedics and leaves. In the interim, while he wakes up and staggers up towards Starla and starts speaking Grant's tongue. All of his dialogues and way talking resemble Grant. Furthermore, the others wake up as well and they all become threateningly dreadful. It turns out that they've become a part of Grant, so they attack Margaret and spit acid on her, which causes her throat to swell up and blister. In the meantime, Wally advances towards Starla, but she bursts his head with a shotgun and decides to run away. On the other hand, Kylie's family also rises up and invades her vehicle. With their bloody mouths, they try to ravage it, but Bill arrives there just in time to save Kylie. She runs away from the car and hides behind him, but they get surrounded by the infected zombies who attack them and try to kill them. Luckily, Bill and Kylie manage to run away to their car, but just then, they witnessed Starla and Jack running for their lives while being chased by zombies. Jack is about to be brutalized, but Bill drives over his own associate just in time, and Starla finishes him off later by plunging a rod in his body. They all climb in Bill's car and speed away while the zombies stagger behind them chanting Starla's name. On their way, Bill calls his associate, Shelby, to get CDC on the line, but her luck runs out as well as her office is raided by the worms. Meanwhile, in the car, Kylie explains the whole situation, how she became Grant as the worm entered her mouth. Furthermore, she explains that the creature is actually from outer space who goes planet to planet and acquires the bodies to ultimately feed upon meat and eventually take over the planet with one single source. Everyone hears the story and they enter the Wheelsy area. Bill tries to contact Shelby again, but it turns out that she's become the monster as well. To hurl them away, she dispatches a vehicle who T-bones their police car into an accident and everything blacks out. As they regain consciousness, their car gets surrounded by zombies who dragged Starla away, but Bill and Kylie manage to escape through the hordes of zombies. After getting to safety, Bill concludes that he will destroy Grant by a grenade who's the source of all this. So, he decides to enter the police station from where he can grab the grenade. But as he enters the darkened station, a demonic deer attacks him and almost rips him apart until Kylie arrives just in time to save him and smash the deer's face. After heaving a sigh of relief, Bill goes ahead to grab the grenade. In the meantime, the zombies lay Starla down on the bed and start undressing her. Meanwhile, Jack wakes up in the cellar where he faces several other zombies. So he runs back upstairs, but gets punctured with the tentacles. On the other hand, Starla wakes up in her nightdress and slowly walks to the room where she hears music being played and her pictures spread all around the walls. Outside, the situation is worsening as Bill and Kylie watch the people becoming a part of Grant's gruesome slimy entity. Bill notices Starla approaching Grant and decides to go after her. Meanwhile, in the house, Grant begins to strangle Starla, but she consoles him emotionally and nears his face to kiss him. But in one single sweep, she thrusts the pointed hairbrush up his face, which enrages him to such an extent that he smashes her in the wall. In the interim, Bill and Kylie manage to run inside, and just as he's about to pull the grenade, Grant uses his arm to throw it away. Bill lunges for it, but the grenade gets thrown into the swimming pool where it bursts and gets wasted. During all this, Grant hurls a sofa into Kylie and uses his tentacles to penetrate Bill. Luckily, Bill doesn't left both of them inside. Grant and his accolades groan in pleasure as one tentacle impulses in Bill's body. Bill plunges the other tentacle into a gas cylinder and it causes the gas to fill up inside Grant's whole spread-out structure. As the monster screams, Bill calls Starla to shoot him, and as he does that, the gas erupts in him, putting him aflame in his whole body, eventually burst into pieces. After the carnage, all the invading zombies also drop to death. Kylie manages to come out safe and they sit beside Bill, who's not infected as only one tentacle penetrated him. After finally getting rid of all the monstrosity, the three of them walk outside among the massacre. Nevertheless, they walk away happily. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more video like this. Thanks for watching this video until the end, and see you in the next video.